Hello and welcome to the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined today by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you this fine summer afternoon?
I'm pooped. I think my wife is trying to kill me.
Makes sense because she's been married to you for about 6 months now.
6 months. So that's the over-under. Somebody made the over-under.
Yeah, the over-under was 5.5 months, and I took the under. So just barely took the under, but
She bought a duplex, and we're having to get it ready for rental. And so we've been in there every freaking day for almost 2 weeks.
Cool story.
I'm tired and old.
Cool story.
Hey.
That's not as good as you trying to get a 20 mile an hour up on the speed limit sign and breaking your collarbone, or whatever happened. But
the more shocking part to me is that I didn't do anything overtly stupid while trying to get this thing ready.
Wait, who was judging that? Was that her? Would she agree, or was that you?
No, I think just based on. Yeah, well, I don't know how to take this. I would work on something, like I fixed a couple pieces of drywall, or I would paint a thing, and the same reaction every time. Wow, that's really good. Thank you. I'm taking it as a compliment.
There you go. Well, that's awfully nice.
No, I can't complain. This has been a wonderful, fun summer so far. We're recording this in the summer of some year that it is.
I saw Fish 5 times. That's kind of shocking, right?
Really?
Yeah. I'm up to 199 Fish shows.
Wow. My record is as it was.
Still zero. Will Houchin, our partner at Petalone Media, he went from 0 to 1.
Wow.
How about that?
You know, the only concert I saw this summer was the Rodney Mack Philadelphia Big Brass. Came to Pittsburgh.
There you go.
And so I got to hear them and
didn't you MC a concert at ABC?
Yeah, well, does that count? A concert that I wasn't in. I did MC a concert.
There you go.
But I got paid to be at that one.
Well, that's the best. I have managed to get comp tickets for a few Fish shows. So, this is actually pretty funny. The first 2 of those 5 Fish shows, I went into my seats. They were supposed to be in the last row of the pavilion at the Meriwether Post Pavilion. I get to where my seats are supposed to be. There are 4 together. There's a seat, and then there is a giant platform where there is a camera mounted on top of it, meaning that 3 of the 4 seats that I have do not exist. So I said to the security guard right there, he was like a kid, and he was like, yeah, that's kind of messed up. I was like, right? So anyway, long story short,
I let you work the camera.
I ended up speaking to Maria, who is an amazing human, and this took 45 minutes to resolve, but she ended up upgrading us to band comp tickets. So we were like in absolutely killer, dead center, sweet spot for sound and lights, and it was a 2-day pass. And so I was like, so what about tomorrow? She said, find me again. I'll take care of you again. And we were so cool about the whole thing. We got VIP lounge passes, and so we were in band comp seats. So that was not so bad. Good. Yeah, thank you, Ticketmaster, for your blatant incompetence. So, and then someone pointed out that there weren't even any holes in the cement. So, like, there never were seats there. This was not like an issue of like they took the seats out to put the camera there. There never were seats there, and they're just selling them. So that's kind of cool, right?
Even weirder.
Yeah, it got weirder as we went. So, but I would gladly go in early to the venue for seats that don't exist to get upgraded to the best seats in the entire place anytime that they want to do that. So thank you, Ticketmaster. I've never said those 3 words in a row. We would like to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
So Rodney Mack was here, and Marty Erickson was playing tuba, and Scott Hartman was playing trombone. So I got to hang a fair amount with Marty. He needed a sousaphone, So I had a power tuba lunch with Marty Erickson and Craig Knox. Craig loaned Marty a sousaphone, and I was the sousaphone proxy. Proxy? No. Locator? What would you call it? Agent?
Pusher.
Yeah. I was the go-between. I was the brains of the operation.
You know how in the movies they say the first sousaphone's always free to get you hooked? Yeah, I've never met that pusher. Yeah.
I think it worked, though.
How about the Papert people?
You know, speaking of, I don't know what we were speaking of. The Papert people are really nice people. Have you met a Papert person?
I have. I've met a couple of them.
They're particularly pleasant.
They are.
Papert people. Anyway, Mary Papert School of Music has a great brass program, and you can find out all about it by clicking on the show notes below. You will be taken to a page that was designed specifically for fans of the Brass Junkies. And you will find out about all the going on there, who teaches, what organizations you can be a part of, what groups you can play with, and a very, 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 very heartfelt thanks to Jim, proud papa of Trudy Nova, for making this happen. Who, you might ask, is Trudy? Well, Jim and his wife had a delightful dachshund for many, many, many years, and not too long ago that dachshund passed, and Jim was very, very sad. And I got a super elated, excited text from Jim yesterday, series of texts, that Trudy is now in their life. Trudy, they have adopted from friends, and they have a new dachshund who is the same age as my dachshund, Maple. So Maple will have some sort of a Doxy coalition. Pittsburgh Dachshunds United, PDU.
You better sign up for that URL before this airs, or else somebody's going to snag it.
No, it should be Pittsburgh United Dachshunds. PUD.
Yeah, I saw where that was going.
That's much better, right?
That's much better. All right, so this listener's choice, we have a question from Walter in Sioux City, Iowa. Walter, yes. What goes into making an album?
You mean like a record album?
Yeah.
You mean like an LP?
Yeah, yes, an 8-track.
Well, that's a very good question. So I don't know why, actually speaking of 8-tracks, my son didn't understand what an 8-track was. And he was like, I tried to explain it to him. He's like a cassette? And I was like, no, like a cassette, only bigger and worse. And what's your experience with 8-tracks? Any?
My experience with 8-tracks is that one of my father's friends at his summer house had an 8-track player when I was a little kid. So I don't think I even heard one, but I saw one a few times in my childhood. That is the full extent to 8-tracks. That in an outdated summer cottage that they just kept it around for nostalgia reasons.
They were awful. The sound quality was not good. Often the song, like it just played for whatever the period of time was, and then it would switch to the next channel with this big ka-chunk, even if it was in the middle of the song. And then sometimes, depending on the quality of the 8-track that you bought, it would pick up right where it left off, or it would pick up at the beginning of that song again.
Nice.
So it was just a huge pain in the rear end. I'm glad that has died. But anyway, that's not what you're talking about.
Well, hopefully that answers your question, Walter.
Thank you, Walter. And that's another episode of No. So we happen to be in the middle of a recording project right now. Andrew and I are, and it is with a group called Cones and Tones. Now, it's been how long ago that we tracked this? 18 months? More than that? 2 years?
It's been 2 years, hasn't it? It wasn't last summer. I think it was the summer before that.
I think so too. So we can use this as an illustration of all of the steps that go into it. But let's back up. Let's say you do want to record a collection of music, and it's weird. The nomenclature for album is, I guess, still relevant. It comes out since the format is now digital, and it comes out as streams, or it comes out piecemeal, or it comes out as EPs or whatever. To call it an album, I guess, will have to suffice for now. So the notion of coming up with a collection of music is step one. And my advice would be to pick music that has a unique vision and helps express the artistic direction you're interested in pursuing.
I would, if I could interject super quickly, I would, Lance was just alluding to this, but just to go a little bit further on this, I would, and we are about to put out an album, so I am not saying that you shouldn't put out an album, but just challenge yourself that you're not just making an assumption that you need to call this an album and that it needs to be about an hour of music and that it all needs to be released at once and that you need to call it an album. It can be hard to be remarkable, which means worth remarking about if whatever your piece of art is the same as everybody else. And I think that there's a draw to making an album, quote unquote. And there are still plenty of people on tenure committees at universities who will be much more impressed by a quote unquote album on a quote unquote label than they would be by you self-producing, 25 individual tracks, which would be the equivalent of a double album. So I'm not saying those people don't exist and that there's no reason to, but just make sure that you're doing it intentionally. And sometimes releasing things one at a time can be a lot cooler and can create a lot more buzz. And, so just don't fall into the trap that you have to release an album. I'm old enough to know that an LP was a quote unquote full album, and an EP was, could be 20 minutes of music, but you couldn't call 20 minutes of music on a CD an LP, and that was priced differently in the store than an EP, which you could be 3 or 4 or 5 songs. But those are all constructs that are completely gone, right? And you could even in a nostalgic way call something an EP, and that actually might be a cool way to be remarkable because people don't release EPs anymore. But the point is that that you don't make sure that you're not making assumptions for how something has to be, which is why it's always good to involve somebody else, because my assumptions are not assumptions, they're facts. And then that's why I have a partner like Lance, because then he points like, well, wait, why are you saying that? I'm like, oh yeah, because it's always been that way, but why? And sometimes it's good to keep it the same way, and other times it's good to turn things on their head or some variation therein.
Well, it's the same. We've had a couple of episodes like this where we talked about brass quintets, and the first question that we always ask back when someone says, hey, I want to start a brass quintet, what do I do? We start with, why do you want to start a brass quintet?
Right. Why?
And so what is the point of this recording in this instance? Why are you doing it? Is it so that some committee is going to be happy to promote you for tenure, or is it because...
Which is totally legit, by the way, if that's your goal. Like,
totally agree.
Totally legit.
Is it because you want to have a record, pardon the pun, of where your group is or where you are as an artist, and you care about this music and you want to get it out there? Is it because you feel like there's an artist or a composer that you feel is underrepresented and you can bring a new spin to it? I mean, there's a jillion reasons to do it, and it's never been easier to do it, but it doesn't mean, how do you do it is the next thing. So let's assume, what would you say goes into a cohesive album, Andrew?
You mean in terms of like the content that you put in an album? I think just having a clear vision of what it is that you're trying to do, if you're and who you're trying to reach and what you're trying to give them. It can be just and sometimes they're even called a sampler, right? Which can be, the cohesion around the content could be that it's not cohesive, just that it's supposed to be just here is a wide array of what Lance LaDuke does musically. I mean, it could be some serious euphonium music. It could be not serious euphonium music. It could be some ukulele. Like the storyline there could be Lance LaDuke, right? You can have a storyline that's much more specific. It could be thematic. It could be a composer. It could be new composers. It could be people of color writing music. It could be, there's really an unlimited number of directions that you can go. But to me, the best things are ones that there's a clear vision as to exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish for whom, and then you go ahead and execute that, because that also then makes can align your strengths and your passions with that. Sometimes you have to do it as an assignment. Like I said, and I'm seriously not disparaging this at all, but if your assignment is to make an album that's published to be able to get tenure or to get, which one's better, associate or assistant? Assistant is it better, right? Yes. I always have to remind myself, like that's a totally worthwhile thing. That's going to be different. And that's going to be viewed through an academic lens. So that's going to be a much different thing than something that's more for entertainment or just a passion project, et cetera. So just kind of getting your vision down on paper and then reverse engineering whatever goes on it to fit that vision, I think is what makes a good piece of art to me.
So let's assume you have a cogent collection of music and it is more than one track, let's just say. I guess it didn't even have to be that. It could be that one track that was 45 minutes long could be an album in this instance. But let's say you have the music together. At this point, if some of the music is not your own and is under copyright, now is not the time to worry about it. The time to worry about, unless you're doing a specific arrangement, then you're going to need to look at getting arrangement permissions, and a company like Copycat can help you with that. Tresona can help you with that. But by and large, until you release the thing, you don't really need to worry about it.
Right.
So let's say you have, we'll use the Cones and Tones project as an example for this. And actually, I'm working on one at Carnegie Mellon with the Tuba band, the Tartan Tuba band. We've been, instead of doing, we perform ridiculous things and record really freaking hard stuff. So it just, however much music we got to over the course of the year is however much we had recorded, and it's going to come out as an album, and that album will be the length that it is. But in the instance of the Cones and Tones, so it's Andrew and me, JD Shaw on horn, and David Cutler on piano. And so we, JD by and large programmed the show initially, and then the album, which is an offshoot of that. We haven't done many shows as Cones and Tones, but they have been very, very fun shows. And I don't know how busy that band will ever get, largely because I don't like traveling. But that's I would be lying if that was not the primary. We're all very, very busy, and we have lots of things going on, and Lance is a pain in the butt. But it's a musical variety show, for lack of a better term, and everybody lots of people purport to have. We play all different styles of music, from that age old,
both country and western,
right? So, but in fact, you know what? I have the scores here, so I can even tell you what's on it.
Hey, look at you!
Stand by.
This is what. I do like, while Lance is looking for the scores, I do like the fact that, for example, a podcast, this episode might end up being, well, it's not going to be 25 minutes because we're already 18 minutes in, but it could be 40, it could be an hour 10. It was not that long ago, and I've done some actual radio where there was PSAs to read, and you had to read the certain number every hour, and like you had to stop at like 58 minutes beforehand, and like there were hard breaks, as they're called in radio, and albums were the same way, where you couldn't release a fully priced compact disc or tape or anything without it being not over a certain number of minutes and not under a certain number of minutes, and that's all completely gone away now, unless you're producing physical media, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, which sometimes is a good idea and frequently is not. But anyway, yeah, what's on the album, Lance?
Well, we recorded the Brahms Hungarian Dance number 5, which was a solo tuba feature.
Oh, yeah, it was.
When we performed it, I actually sang the Alan Sherman Hungarian Goulash words to that as well. Tournament Gallop by Gottschalk, a whole bunch of Piazzolla stuff. Dave Brubeck's Unsquare Dance, 3 Gershwin, the 3 Preludes by Gershwin. I've forgotten some of this, by the way. Do you remember all of the things? Like,
I wouldn't have been able to come up with a list off the top of my head, but
I feel better. The Flower Duet by Leo. Past Midnight, Barbara York.
Right, that's beautiful.
And more 4 tangos. I don't know if we got to those. So we'll pick the Hungarian dance number 5 as an example, because I happen to have that score on top. So this is the music that we were scheduled to record. And so what we did...
We did this one in one take.
We did everything in one take. We will never release it. We set up some performances ahead of time so that we had opportunities to work on it. If you can do this, it works to your benefit for a number of ways. For us, one of the advantages was that the preparation for the concerts, we were getting paid for the concerts, so it was a way to amortize the costs of rehearsing for the recordings. So we rehearsed, did these performances, and then went in and did the recordings not too long after the fact. So the music was fresh in our head, and we were able to put it in front of an audience and figure out what worked and what didn't work. We were in a recital hall, a concert hall, and the first thing that happens is the first thing that happens is you pick the tunes. Then you got to figure out who's going to be in the room. And that seems like a simple enough thing. Well, you need the musicians there and whoever's going to do the recording. But it's actually a little more involved than that, depending on the project. For this project, for example, it involved piano. So while the piano tuner wasn't in the room that day, we needed to have the piano tuner in the room earlier in every day that we were tracking, just to make sure that the piano was in good order. So now,
and had to choose a space that we could get a piano that was good enough to record.
Yeah, there's a ton of logistical concerns that come into it. And then what sorts of mics do you want to use, and where will the mics be placed? And so this is where you need to have a great engineer. And so Jeff Vaughn, who did the engineering, he's super easy to work with, great ears. It was like having an additional producer in the control room with us. And so I choose my terms carefully. The engineer makes sure that the levels are okay and that tape is running and that is running and that we're getting everything that we are setting out to get. The producer is in charge of making sure that all of the notes that we want played are played in the right order, in time, in tune, and with the musical intent that we're going after. So the producer can really make or break a project. And in fact, a producer, just not to go too far down this rabbit hole, producer's job is about 50%, it's about 30% musical and about 70% psychological. Mm-hmm. And that person has to read the room and get a sense of how the group is doing and whether the group needs a break, and keeping an eye on the clock and making sure that we're getting a lot done, or the right amount of stuff done based on the amount of music you have and the amount of time in which you have to collect everything. So
if I may really quickly, TBJ116, which is titled Sam Palafian on Producing, and Lance is going to link to that in the show notes. But when I had to produce my first recording session a few years ago, what did I do? But I called the answer man, Sam Palafian, and I texted him, and then he said, "I'll call you in 5 minutes." And then I knew that meant that I needed to have my computer open. And I pounded out notes, and there's it's actually it's a long episode. Long for that. It was awesome. It was really, really great. It is I'm not even seeing how long it is, but it's like a good 20-25 minutes. That's just Sam on talking about how to be a producer and about it's really great. He recommended an app to get your ears in line, the number one job of a producer, which is reading the room, why a producer has to be the continuity expert, how to organize a take sheet to make things easier when the edits are done, which we're about to get to. It's really fascinating, so definitely check that out.
Well, let's don't spend too much time talking about that part, because he said it a bajillion times better than you or I could. So,
Amen.
Scott Weiss is the director of bands and conducts the orchestra at University of South Carolina, where we did the tracking, and that's where JD and Dave Cutler both work. And so we brought Scott in, and he was just fantastic, great to work with, and super well organized, great ears. And it was just like having an ally in the group. So in a nutshell, we went through and we had whatever it was, 12 tracks, let's say, and we recorded all the material for those tracks multiple times in small chunks. So, for example, I'm looking at Hungarian Rhapsody. So in Hungarian Rhapsody, we went from the beginning up to letter F, which was, I don't know, about 40 measures. And so that was going to be the first chunk. And so we will tackle it sort of chunk by chunk, make sure that we get into the next section a little bit. And then we want to make sure that we have what we call coverage, and that we have a good take, at least one good take, preferably more than one, so you can make musical decisions rather than having to make decisions based on, well, this is the only one we didn't screw up in. You want to have the ability to choose the musical ideas as well. So we would do that a number of times. It looks like we did it 4 times to get the beginning up through E or F.
I nailed it all 4 times.
Guess what it says here? Yeah. It's very good, particularly Andrew. Shocking that one man can sound this good.
It was all JD. He misses so many notes on the horn. It's crazy. Actually, don't tell him I said this, but he misses less notes than any horn player I've ever played with in my life. But he's like a brother to me, so I don't like saying nice things about him. So do not tell him I said that.
Well, and when he does occasionally miss one, he loses his mind, which is awesome.
Because it happens once a month.
Yeah,
I used to enjoy being there for that one time each month, but now I play with him so infrequently that I get together with him for 3 days and he just doesn't miss anything, and it's annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But where were you?
So then you just go through and you make sure that you have everything from the first from the room sound before the first take, and then you go all the way to the end of the tune, and you just make sure that you have everything covered. So in this particular instance, we went let's see, from take 294 to 323. So what is that? About 30 takes to get that whole tune done from beginning to end. And so you go, and then you do the next tune, and you do the next tune, and you do the next tune. And so for brass players, the other concern you have to figure out is how much face you have to get through these things. So
brain.
Well, there's that.
Yep.
And so if it's a really notey piece or a real touch piece, like it's just going to take a ton of concentration or a ton of face, how you place that in the session is really, really important.
Yeah, and tempo changes are hard. Ritardandos, accelerandos, those kind of things are a lot harder than just something that's got that's the same tempo. And as as Sam talked about, the continuity expert, if you have 2 takes that are not at exactly the same speed, then it's useless. Mm-hmm. So which is why you use a click, like for every single take, you can't start one at 160 and one at 158, or you can't use it. Which is also why it can be hard to circle back around if you're not getting something for the end of the session or the next day. It's possible, but it's challenging. There's a lot of considerations, and there's a lot of places to get frustrating. To get frustrating. I'm always frustrating. To get frustrated. The first recording that I ever did was with Boston Brass, was Within Earshot, which was, I think, one of the best recordings that I've ever been able to have my name on. But I did not enjoy the process in the least. It was so stressful. And everybody else in that room had done a number of recordings, and it was my first one. And I was prepared to play it, and I'm quite happy with how my playing got into those mics and then onto the album. But man, I did not enjoy it at all. It was like a feeling of relief when I got done. And I remember it was JD actually who said, no, it was Rich Kelly who said. He said, Hitz, you're going to learn, like, with some more experience, you're going to enjoy recording. And he was right. Like, yeah, because it's true. You just kind of you kind of go with the flow a little bit more, and you realize that when you trust the producer, then everything's going to get captured. So if you're prepared and you trust the producer, everything's going to get captured.
Well, so there's a couple, this may end up, at the rate we're going, this may end up being a couple of episodes, but I'm curious about a couple things. One is, do you prefer, a lot of times at the beginning of a recording session, you record some stuff and then the engineer or the producer will say, hey, do you want to come in and listen to it? Do you like to go in and listen, or do you prefer not to?
In the beginning, I did not want to listen. I just kind of trusted them. And that session was produced by John Laverty, who's amazing. I do like to go in and listen. Although everybody needs to be happy, but it's also you don't need 5 guys with 5 different opinions all going in and all talking at the same time. But you don't want to spend 4 days and all those months of preparation to then like not get the right euphonium sound captured. So I kind of like it. I've grown to like it. Before I would just stay out and I'd just be like, JD, go deal with that. Because I also trusted him and knew that he'd get it.
Yeah. I never have liked it. Still don't like it.
Yeah, there you go.
I assume that if we've picked the team correctly, then it's going to be all right. And I know that JD really likes going in and listening a little bit at the beginning. And so
I'll never like it that much.
Yeah. And so I don't have to like it because I know he does.
Right. Everything is about trust. How many times do we just say this? Right. I mean, if you don't trust the engineer and you don't trust the producer and you don't trust the person who's going in, it's like it's probably not going to end up very good. And even if it does by some miracle, you are not going to have a pleasant 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days.
Exactly.
Like at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, the other question I have is, what are the, sounds like an obvious question, but what are the differences in terms of playing that between the recording session and on stage? I can just put a period there if you want, or a question mark, I guess. How do you find those differences? Do you prepare differently? I don't think I really prepare differently, but my brain is in a very, very different place when I'm recording than when I'm performing. And I was just curious if that's the same for you, and if so, how would you describe that?
There's no difference in my preparation. You just either the part or you don't. The actual, I don't know whether it's the parts of the brain or how we're using them or I don't know, but recording is way more intense for me than performing. And part of that has to be that I have performed in high pressure situations like way over 1,000 times, and that I've only been a part of like 10 or 11 or 12 recordings. So, so maybe part of it's just miles, behind the wheel, but the recording session thing is also this, especially when you're dealing with brass players, is that you need to be able to recreate what you just did so that you can use parts of things. It's the most stressful times for me in a recording session are actually not when I'm playing a solo. It's when I'm playing something that's a little bit tricky under a solo. So like JD is doing something ungodly for the horn, which he sounds like I literally in 14 years of Boston Brass, well, let's see, how many years is that with JD? 8.5 years with JD, playing 100 shows a year. I heard him say, "I'm tired," twice. And I heard him sound tired, I'm not joking, 0 times. Both times he said he was tired, he didn't sound it. I think he just wasn't comfortable. But even he has a limited number of times that he can do horn god takes in a recording session. So it's the most stressful times are when it's something underneath, like you and I have some line together, and it's like you don't want to not have a release be together 2 times in a row, so you just waste 2 unbelievable takes of JD. Right. It's like those are I don't want to waste your chops. So mine aren't an issue, but that's the most stressful thing, and that there's kind of a layer there where in a concert, and I'm trying just as hard to make that release be exactly with you under JD solo, because that's what makes something go from good to possibly really good. But the audience is going to be digging his solo no matter what, whether you and I release exactly together or whether, it's always you that doesn't release with me, but it's just a little bit of, Lance holding over. But yeah, so that's where it's very different.
Just my signature.
Trumpets, lead trumpets, and they're supposed to hold over on the high notes. Yeah, Lance just likes to Just like, he likes to play the fifth just a little longer than the rest of the chord. It's his trademark.
And really flat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like his tritones are interesting.
For me, it's like a totally different kind of concentration. And I think when I'm on stage, I feel like there's always one eye and ear on the audience, and I'm trying to perceive where the audience is in any given moment. And I'm dealing with working within the group and performing within the group, as well as trying to interpret, pick up any signals from the audience as to whether they're digging what we're doing or just sort of where they are.
Right.
And in the recording session, I'm so much more zen, for lack of a better term, or just sort of present.
Right.
And it's this incredibly the concentration level is it's very, very, very different. I feel like it's a little more loose on stage, just because it's a little more shucking and jiving, and there's a performance aspect of it. And it's not to say that there's not concentration there, but in the recording session, I love doing that, just because it's just like taking a bath in this sound. I mean, I'm sitting, and you're on one side of me, and JD's on the other side of me. Piano's behind me. Cutler's one of the greatest musicians that I mean, God, I hope he doesn't hear this. He's one of the greatest musicians that I've ever been on stage with. His brain doesn't work like other people's brains, and there's nothing that he can't play, from what I can tell.
Right.
And so to be surrounded by this, and to be playing this incredibly challenging music at a really high level consistently, is just so fun. It's just so fun and so rewarding. Those popped into my head. I wasn't sure.
No, yes, and also there's something to be said. It's very challenging to keep a recording session sounding fresh when you're trying to replicate the same thing. You can't, when you're playing brass instruments, you can't just be changing things every time, just because, again, like accuracy issues and that kind of thing. And like, Sam said, the continuity expert, like, you can't just take something you can't start something slower, or else whatever you just handed off from is no longer going to make any sense. And so there's just, yeah, and brass instruments do not lend themselves to just like, let's do one take, If you've got a jazz combo that's smoking, you can do that, and you try and do larger chunks, because that helps the musical continuity. Like, the longer the chunk can be, the better. Anybody could do 4 bars at a time. It's really hard to make that, then put it together and make that sound like a live recording that's just like really good. Mm-hmm. So, which is kind of what we're going for.
The next time we get either Nova or Christopher Bill, or somebody that does, or Bill Pritchard, or anybody who's doing, we're talking about one way to do a recording, and it's very classically oriented. There's a score, and there's a right note and a wrong note.
Yes.
And Bill Pritchard is doing overdub things with him, like using a looping pedal, and he's kind of building things on the spot. And then with the stuff that Chris Bill and Nova are doing, I'd be interested to talk to. I'd just be interested to know what it's like mentally for them as they're layering in the third or the fifth or the ninth part.
Right.
How do you keep track of all of that stuff, and how do you remember all those things? It's an interesting set of gymnastics, where for us it has to be about the perception of these other 3 humans around you, and then how does your part fit into the overall whole.
Right.
And we'll just leave the fact that I said overall whole and just keep moving down the road. So let's assume that we have all of the tracks. It took us, how many days did we do that? 2 days, 3 days?
It went really fast, which our last 2 recording sessions, the Brass Recording Project Volume 1 and then this, both they just flew, because we had great engineer, great producer, and we know what we're doing at this point, like individually and with each other. So it went really fast.
Yeah, in fact, in the Brass Recording Project, it was hilarious. We had to scare up more music, because
we were literally printing out more parts.
Yeah,
because we're like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, even our aggressive estimates were like, we blew past them. I was like, well, okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's what happens when people show up prepared.
Yep.
Isn't that weird?
Yep. And when he says people, he means every single person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that was I hope that didn't sound like a slam, because that was the case with Boston Brass, and that was the case. It's like that's the default, is that you show up and you know all that stuff.
I have been involved, and I've been involved in a lot of recordings, like both as a player and producer, and just helping out. I've been involved in recordings where that was not the case, and boy, yeah, that's hard waters to it's hard waters to navigate. I'll just put it that way.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, so let's say that's all done. We have it all done, and then unless the producer is going to be handling the edits, which in this case they were not, then the producer will hand over their notes and the scores. And so between that's kind of the roadmap. You've got a set of legal. I've got on my right, I'm looking at a legal pad that says Hungarian Dance number 5, and on my left, I'm looking at there's a score that is for that piece. And so then somebody, and in this instance, it's me. One of my summer projects is to assemble the paper edits for this project.
Right.
And again, if you're doing more of a poppy thing, it doesn't have to go this way. It could be that you lay in the drum tracks and then the vocals, or you put in a scratch track of vocals and then you add the rest of it to it, and it's a little more organic. It grows a little more organically. In this case, it's much like a Sudoku or a crossword puzzle. So now I have the recordings. I have all the raw tracks, and I have Scott's notes, and I have Jeff's notes from the score, or maybe they were Scott's too. I don't know who wrote on the score itself. And now I go in and I do what we call paper edits. And
by the way, the person who wrote, "I can't believe that anyone played that well about me," I wrote that.
I know, I recognize your handwriting. But every page, you had to write that on every page? Seriously. And purple is a beautiful crayon color. So, so now I will, actually starting next week, I will start maybe with this tune. I don't know. And I will go to the first take, and I will listen to all 4 takes. I'll listen to all the material that I have for the beginning to E or F, which is the section we were talking about before. And then I'll start to assemble it. And then I will just mark in the score, well, this is the section we want take 294 from this measure to this measure, and then I'll make a mark. Okay, and this at this point, then we want to go to take 297, and then we go back to 294, and then sometimes, and so I just work my way through the score that way, and I just go on to the next tune and on to the next tune, and it's very fun. I actually kind of enjoy it, and it's also exhausting. So I can only do it for a couple of hours, and then I'm kind of done. My ears are burned out, my brain is burned out. I need to,
it's really hard. It's really hard.
But it's rewarding, because then you feel like, okay, this is we're building a thing now, and it's kind of I can't wait to hear it, because it's been so long now too. It's going to be really refreshing, and which I'm going to hand it off to you in a second. But there's one last thing, which is that once I've, you found these big chunks that fit together nicely, and every once in a while there's a blemish in there, so you try not to, but every once in a while you have to stick in like a 1-second edit in there. It's a pain in the rear end for the engineer, but sometimes it's necessary to get the ideal thing. Mm-hmm. So you probably know where I'm leading you, but what's the advantage to me having had a couple of years between when we did this and when I'm getting ready to do this? Like, if you were doing this, wait, what? I'm excited for one thing.
It's that you don't remember anything about it at all.
Yeah. Particularly the things that I did wrong.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I can't. I actually, the only thing I remember about the session was there was one. Which this is obnoxious, but I was proud. There was one like octave jump thing that JD put in under one of his solos. And I did it like this was in my part, and I nailed the crap out of it, and then we did it again, and then I nailed the crap out of it, and then we were done. And I just remember JD was just one of those, Jamie was he was like, That was impressive. I was like, thanks, man. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not like trying to make it sound like he compliments me a lot. He's very nice like that. But, it was just like, that's the only thing I remember from the whole session, like specifically. And I know that there was some stuff that I wasn't doing right. There was a few more like, let's do that one more time for the hippie. Yeah. It's like, but I don't remember any of that. So when you go in with a clean slate, I'm sure it's going to be very easy for you to not be focusing on your own part. Because that's like that can be hard, even as a producer. By the way, if I'm producing a brass quintet session, guess where my ears go? Like, yeah, I mean, I hate trumpet players, so it not only goes away from them, but no, it goes to the tuba part, you can't let things slip. You can't when the melody's not right, that's painfully obvious, but you got to notice because the horn and the trombone are counting on you if they're doing harmony that it's balanced correctly, because there's a good chance it's balanced correctly out there. That's why they're playing it that way. But all that matters is what gets into the microphones. That's it. That's what a recording is. Yep. So they're trusting me to not just be listening to the tuba.
Yeah.
So because they're not going to hire 5 producers. That would be expensive and a very bad idea. So coming with a clean slate has got to be kind of cool for you.
I'm pretty excited. Because, in fact, I've forgotten some of these tunes. I was like, oh, yeah, that was really cool. And, hey, we did this on that. And, that's going to be really, really fun. And then the scariest part for me, which is I compile all that stuff, and it'll take however long it takes. I'm hoping under 2 weeks, maybe a week. I don't know. We'll find out. Then I send it off. And then the editor will go in and edit it all together. And then ears start getting on it. And then the question is, was that really the best version of that?
Right. And then you have to defend them. Yeah. It is tough.
And we're all buddies. And so it's easy because there's no BS. We can just say, hey, are you sure? There's got to be a better one in there.
Right.
And then at some point around the 18th time, I'm like, dude, that was the one. But and actually, here's another thing that happened in the session that I just saw the note for. It was on day one. Take... So take 1, 2, 3. So look at here. So take 1. Here's take 1. Good C score tuba. I don't know what that means.
It means I just played so well that they wanted to note.
Yeah, but then you move on down. Take 7, take 8, take 9. Well, this says everything you need to know about working with David Cutler. Cutler is playing different chords every time.
There may or may not have been a time during the session where Cutler was right next to me, where I turned, and again, the 4 of us are very close. Like, I would not do this if you hired me to play on your session. I turned to Cutler, and I just started screaming at him. I was like, and I was dropping F-bombs. I was like, play the same thing every take. And then that's when he was like, I don't remember what I played the last take.
I can't remember. I know that's the problem with the genius. Like, he doesn't know what he just did.
No, and every time it's more brilliant than the last. But I was like, cut it out.
Okay, so that was take 9. All right, take 10. C score, buzz in piano.
Right.
Stop. So that was it. Like, we can't have been an hour into the first session. I mean, probably 20 minutes.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, there was a buzz in the piano. And so then all the momentum that we'd had, all that stuff, we had to put the brakes on.
Yeah, that and there's part of the mental thing, right? Yeah, because the room is ready to like crush this, and we ended up doing that, but I had forgotten that I think with capturing the sound and everything, we were probably like, 45 to an hour in, including the takes, and like that's a terrible time to slam on the brakes with this kind of like uncertain, like, is this even going to work? Like, can we get and you start not in a panicky way, but it's like, can we get a new piano? No. I mean, like, what are we just going to like, there was a Steinway out on the loading dock. Maybe let's try that one instead, and we were in a space where they had to like, it was a lecture hall that they brought a piano. I don't remember whether it's like a ship in a bottle. Like, I don't remember how they even got the piano in there, but it was, I remember that. I do remember that now.
That was not so fun.
Yep.
Okay, so following that progression along, I send off the paper edits. The engineer will make the edits, and then everybody gets an opportunity. I don't know if everybody will I don't know how we'll do that. It can be the case that, in my mind, it shouldn't be me. Like, I've heard it.
Right.
So you or Cutler or JD, and probably JD, just because of the way the thing came together. They're his arrangements. Mm-hmm. He sort of set it up. He knew what he had in mind. So probably JD will get a first whack at it.
And he's damn good at it.
And he's really good at it. So he'll get a whack at, okay, is this all of the best stuff? And then around in there, we'll also start talking about, because up to this point, we've had a hunch as to what order the tunes should go in if you're thinking about putting it out all at once. But then once you have them, then you really get a sense, this hands off into that really nicely. And that can be the same order as you would do it in a performance, but it doesn't have to be. Where you're taking someone on a journey in a concert is impacted by lots and lots of things, and how you set up a tune and what is said, if anything, between, and the staging concerns, and somebody needs a face break, and there's just so many other factors. And on the album, it's much more about what's the next logical place to take someone, and or what would be a surprising place to take someone.
Right.
And so that part will start along with, okay, so now we have this thing. What else do we need to do to it? Is the balance right? Mm-hmm. So we leave the balance questions, I'll pick up on some of that ahead of time. If I listen to the tracks and I go, boy, horn is really hot on this one, or piano, down at the low end of the piano, we can't hear, blah, blah, blah. And I'll make notes accordingly. So we used, I can't even remember, half a dozen or so mics. So we'll have some flexibility in there to deal with the mix, which is to make sure that you're hearing everything that you want to hear at the time that you want to hear it. And then once all the mixing is done and everybody's happy with it, then we take it out for mastering. And in mastering, it's kind of like a magical dark art. It has been probably best described to me as enhancing the recording as much as possible. In other words, you have this maximum threshold and a minimum threshold, and your recording may have only used, say, 2/3 of that threshold. And so one of the things that mastering does is it helps fill that out so that you get the fullest possible and the cleanest possible performance of this thing. And it's sort of just kind of like here's what it is. When you go to the car wash and you can get just sort of the regular wash, or you can get the super whiz-bang wash that has the undercarriage and the super wax that if a bird flies by, it decides, like, by looking at your car, like, no, not that car. Mastering sort of does that.
It's like waxing the undercarriage.
It's like waxing your undercarriage.
Moving right along.
Anyway, so now we have a mastered product. And then what do we do with it? And so now is when you need to start thinking about the copyright issues. And the solutions are so much easier than they were with the first projects that I was involved with. You can go to a place like CD Baby, or you can go to Song Trader, and you just, you list, here's the tunes. And one of the reasons that you don't deal with all of this stuff ahead of time is that getting what is called mechanical rights, which is the right to record a thing. To get the mechanical rights, one of the pieces of data that you need is how long is your performance of this thing, because the cost is based on that length, and if you can't know that before you record the thing. And so now we can go to one of those companies and figure out, well, how are we going to distribute this thing? And if we were a full-time touring group, I still think there's a place for us to make CDs, but we are not. And so my hunch, I don't know that we've really had a super serious conversation about this yet, is that we'll probably release it digitally only, I would guess. I mean, maybe we're going to make some hard copies as collector's items or as, thank yous for people, but I don't know. What do you think?
The only, I would never want to decide this for the whole group, but I can't fathom making anything other than possibly like pressing vinyl. Mm-hmm. Because there are people who love vinyl and who will pay a premium for it, and like a limited edition of, like a limited run of like 50 copies of vinyl. Mm-hmm. Then there's scarcity. Nobody. The best advice I would have for people is after you've got the whole thing is to get into a time machine and go back 20 years and then sell it to people.
Right.
But now, it's I every once in a while point out to other musicians. It's like, how much money did you spend if you're our age? How much money did you spend in 2005 on digital downloads, like on iTunes, and then and physical, and then how much do you spend now? And how much money did you spend on recordings last month? It's like probably like the answer might be zero. Other than I stream in a couple of places, and every once in a while I do buy something on Bandcamp, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Yeah. So you're not going to make money off of a recording. Period. You are not going to make money off of a recording. And that's why it's also important, not just artistically, but also like, what are you trying to get out of this recording? That can inform what platforms it's available for, whether you charge anything for it or not, what you call it, whether you go with a label. It wasn't that long ago that there was that labels offer distribution. Right, same thing with publishers when you're an author, and I think some of those are hanging on because people still just assume that label is good. And I'm not here to say label is bad, but if a label is offering you that they are going to that you pay to make the entire album, which the last Boston Brass album that you and I made cost the band $20,000, and we hired Steve Gadd to play on 2 tunes, and we hired Sam and Clark Rigsby were the producer, and I mean those are it's like A-team level people, but you pay for all of that, and then they own the rights to it. It's like
exactly.
It's like wait, what?
Yeah.
It's like if you're a painter and you pay for all the supplies, you do all the, and then you then some art house then owns it. It's like, and can rent it to people to look at it. It's kind of weird. Now, sometimes when you're going for that tenure file, then being able to say that you're on the same label as Joe Alessi or whoever can be worthwhile. And I'm not telling you it's not. Just go in with your eyes open.
Yeah.
And also, distribution, the labels don't offer any distribution anymore at all that you can't get yourself for under $100. Yeah. Go to
CD Baby right now, sign up, upload your stuff, and then it's instantly out to the world.
It's global.
And done.
It's it's available on 100 platforms or something. I mean, it's it's instant. Yeah. It used to be that you'd have to apply to all those separately, and that there'd be some real legwork there. It's, by the way, similar to good management. If you have management, will get you good gigs and will open doors for you that you couldn't open yourself. Bad management rarely, if ever, does that, and then still takes 20% of all of the gigs that you get yourself just for executing a contract. And contracts are important. But I mean, for the love of God, do you really need to give them $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000 to send an already typed up a standard contract? It's like, well, no, that's not worth $2,000. Would you pay LegalZoom $2,000 to do that? To use a template was the word I was just not thinking of, to send and then send you an email copy of it. Well, no, I wouldn't pay $2,000 for that. So again, that's bad management, and it can be the same thing for the label. So it's important anytime that I'm working with a music business consulting client that get what your artistic vision is, who you're trying to serve with what art, and then what your ultimate goals are professionally for this. And for Cones and Tones, there's a few things that we had, but one thing is I think it's a great band. They're great arrangements, and I want them to be shared now, and I want them to be around when I'm gone. There's just not that many people. Put it this way, I don't see my parents buying this album. I bet they're going to go to Spotify or to YouTube Music or whatever. They're going to listen to it for sure. And if there was physical, I would give it to them. So that's not a good example, but you know what I mean? They're not going to... Hell, my friends on GroupMe that I've been friends with for my groomsmen are not going to buy my album. And they would have 20 years ago because they would want to hear it. And so they would have bought it.
Yep.
So not anymore.
No, exactly. With my mom, I'm going to have to burn it to a CD and then give it to her.
And then like play it into a megaphone.
Oh, I like the Victrola. Sounds just like my mom.
Your mom is awesome.
She is pretty awesome.
Yep.
I think we did, the part we should save. Actually, this might be an interesting teaser for an episode
right.
that we might do in the future. And if we don't, then if you're listening right now, stop listening. So, but you won't know until after you've heard what it is. Anyway, so
stop listening.
How we release this thing is very interesting now in a way that wasn't, I think, even when we recorded it a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And the notion of, do we trickle it out? Do we create some video content to go along with it? Do we put it behind a paywall? Do we send it out to the world and just yell and cross our fingers and hope? And so I think we have some cool conversations coming up with the four of us as to how we might best get this music out there. I think, it always feels like this in a recording session. I felt like this about the Boston Brass Latin Nights album, and I definitely felt like this about this album. I feel like it's some of the best playing I've been a part of.
Right.
And then with the Brass Recording Project too. Like It's just the quality of the arrangements, the quality of the performances. I just remember feeling like, well, if I got hit by a bus, that's pretty good. That the thing that we just did, the amount of music that we made, like if that was the last thing that I ever recorded,
right,
I'm all right. That was good. That's a good one to go out on.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Dinner each night was that first recording session. Dinner was like, okay, survive day one, but day two looms. It was
yes.
like, I was not relaxed. So, and this one, it was like, I kicked that in the tail, and then we're going to do that again tomorrow. So, yeah. Yep. It's amazing how there's momentum.
I'm hoping that we're recording this in the summer of 2019. I'm hoping that, by the fall, I'm hoping that we have some evidence of this out in the wide world.
I bet it's going to be by the fall, or it's going to be by the fall of like 2022. It's probably going to go one of those two directions.
Here's a little insight into me. I hate having things on my side of the ping pong table.
Right.
And so I feel the pressure building because these are now, when I was in South Carolina for Savvy, JD handed me this huge binder or this packet full of all of the scores, all of the stuff. And life is just sort of, we've gotten the duplex ready and all this stuff.
Oh, tell that story again. It was fascinating.
I'm too tired. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. This is it. This
right.
project and this other album project, and so now I cannot wait to bounce it back off of my side of the ping pong table.
Right. Yeah, man.
So, I'm super excited. I hope this was useful. We kind of forget that we've done it enough times that we forget that it's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing. It is a thing. That was deep, man. It's a thing.
That's the thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everyone for listening. As always, we will be back in 2 weeks with another interview. And that is going to do it for this episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.